Dr. Aimie, honey, how are you doing today?
I am so good. It's so good to see you.
I know what a lot of people don't know is that we just spent the last, I don't know, half hour just talking. And I cannot tell you how excited I am. You are one of my cherished people. You are my go to expert when it comes to trauma. And as I've shared a lot here on the show, I have a lot of it, and you have helped me to process so much of that trauma. Although I still feel like that's a little bit more work to do. One of the things I see a lot in my community and even in my patients, particularly as I'm taking care of women in midlife, is they are stressed to the nine. They're feeling burned out. They're running on fumes and they're stretched thin. And yet they are still efforting and they are downplaying a lot of what is coming up for them because I think that that is the only way that they feel like they can survive, that they can just keep going another day. And I know that there's so much more under the surface than us just like, okay, my day to day is what it is. I feel like there's more to explore and there's more bubbling in our biology. And I'd love for you to get into kind of why is it that particularly women I find downplay a lot of their symptoms and how is it showing up in our biology?
It is so fascinating for me to see the studies on epigenetics and the social studies for looking at the diseases that women get
Mm,
because we get the diseases of trauma.
yeah.
We absorb so much. And I think that some of this is our natural tendency to be more empathic, more able to see other people's pain and to care about other people's pain. Now, then there's all this aspect of, and then some of us, like that was how we survived our childhood. We survived our childhood by becoming the people pleaser. We survived by making sure that our parent was okay, that their mood was stable, and we lost ourselves in the process. And then somewhere, somehow that gets stored in our body. And then before we know it, we're 30, 40, 50, and we're getting sick and we're getting these diseases, and it's a natural, predictable thing that happens. But because it is underneath the surface, there's a tendency to focus more on, well, what's my physical health condition? Then what might be some of the emotional roots that led to this? And a lot of the women that come through my program, Dr. Mariza, they don't even know that they've had trauma. They look back at their life and they're like, well, okay, like there were times when it was stressful in my family, but there wasn't big abuse. I wasn't in the foster care system. I wasn't going through a war. So who am I to complain? Who am I to use that word trauma when I can look at other people and see that they've been through trauma? So much of my work has also been asking questions that help them see, but what did your body go through at that time?
Mm.
And I ask them questions like, when would have been the first time? It's usually around elementary school age. When was the first time that you remember realizing that something was wrong with you? That you had the thought or you had the feeling, I'm a mistake. Not that you had made a mistake, that you were a mistake. Or when was that time when you were growing up when you were forced to do something and go along with something that you weren't okay with, but because you were the child, you didn't have a choice? Or when did you compromise who you truly were in order to help a caregiver, a teacher, an adult be okay, thinking that if they were okay, then you would be okay, and you lost yourself in the process? And everyone can usually tell me a story, share a memory. And then that's when I'm able to bring it home to them and say, at that time, that was a trauma for you. That was a trauma for your body. You've been looking at it through your adult perspective. As an adult, we can look back and say, oh, I was a child. I didn't understand all the issues involved, all the context of the divorce, of having to move schools, the bully in the school, whatever the situation was. Our adult perspective is very different than what we would have been through at that time, with the resources we had at that time, with the information we had at that time, with the emotional maturity we had at that time. And anything, and here's my definition of trauma then, anything that overwhelms our capacity to respond becomes a trauma for our body. And those changes impact us down to the cellular level, the immune system level. And so they are what become our diseases, often decades later.
Hmm.
And when those diseases appear, that's an opportunity for us to reflect back and see, what are the roots of this? Because in my approach to the healing journey, I want to also include that. I still need to do everything that I need to do for this present moment condition, but I also want to address the emotional roots as part of my overall approach for me to have the best possible outcome for my life, for my health, for being my best self.
So much to unpack. I love the explanation. I have always loved your definition of biology. It really opens the door to realize that all of us, at some point in probably our childhood journey, had gone past our capacity in that moment. I think about, the adaptations that we grow into that we don't even know we're an adaptation. So many of my adaptations really do look like superpowers. And I think a lot of people's adaptations, and not all of our adaptations are superpowers by any means, but especially these survival adaptations can feel like superpowers. And they felt like superpowers for so long until I didn't have capacity to operate at that level anymore. And so do you find that even when working with a lot of the women that are coming into these programs that, helping, not only helping them to identify kind of when was that moment, but also I have a feeling that maybe some of them don't even know that their adaptations are actually adaptations.
100% true. Because as you mentioned at the very beginning, this is all we've ever done. So we
Right.
don't know any different. How would we know that this was an adaptation? It was an adaptation that we formed unconsciously in order to get through a situation that we didn't see any other way to get through. And then that just became our default way of getting through life,
Yeah.
getting through everything.
Everything.
And
It's the thing you pull out of the hat. It's,
exactly.
I think of neurons that fire together, wire together.
Yeah,
I always say that some of those patterns or adaptations are my deepest patterns, my
absolutely.
default patterns. My body's like, oh, yeah, we know how to do this. We know how to adapt to this moment. We've been doing this since you were 4.
And that's the beauty of the body. That's the beauty of the nervous system for me, which is why I love then to help teach people to know how to change their nervous system, because that's really where the shifts in their life are going to come from. Because our nervous system, designed to help us survive, automates everything that it can. It wants to save us energy because at the end of the day, energy is our most important resource. Everything comes down to energy.
Yeah.
If we don't have energy, we're not going to learn something new because we don't have the energy to learn. So even knowledge, even integration of that knowledge, change, behaviors, relationships, conversations, everything takes energy. And so our brain, our nervous system is like, in order to help you have more energy, I'm going to automate everything. So everything that seems to work well and give you a better outcome in terms of feeling less pain, I'm going to just automate for you so that you don't even think about it. And then we're reacting and making decisions without even realizing that that was a decision point because we're now utilizing our neuroplasticity. So when I look at the trauma healing journey, it's about building our capacity, improving our energy production and utilization, and having that change our neuroplasticity.
Mm. I love that. That does sound, I'm not going to lie, I bet someone's listening and they're like, okay, well, that sounds complicated. That how do I do that? And I get the how is a whole different conversation. I want to pivot for just a little minute. You were talking about how in these adaptations or how when we store trauma in the biology of our cells, that decades later, that's when we start to see the manifestation of those diseases. And particularly where I start to see the manifestation for disease from a lot of my women, my patients is going to be in midlife. And is it a coincidence that all of a sudden hormones are deregulating and not binding to receptor sites, not communicating with neurotransmitters in the brain? I always say that perimenopause in particular is a neuroendocrine transition, that a lot of the symptoms that women are experiencing are brain related. And so, yes, we may have an uptick in autoimmunity and inflammation as well here. And I would say that so many of my women were like, I used to feel steady. I used to feel like I had it all together. I used to feel like I had my edge. I had capacity. And then I got to this chaos, this moment, reckoning, and I did not. I feel rage. I feel deep anxiety. I feel worry. I have no bandwidth. I am irritated. My stress tolerance just fluttered away. Like I don't have it anymore. I don't have capacity. And yet my life hasn't changed. I still have to show up for my family, my kids, my career, my parents, everybody. And now there's this manifestation of something even deeper, which is the kind of the manifestation of more disease states. So it's, I laugh. I laugh at this time because I'm like, how is this that it all has to happen right now? Like, couldn't we have broken this down into phases?
Would be nice. And there's so much science behind why this trifecta comes together and it all hits us at once. And as we look at the body and its adaptations,
Mhm.
the hormones are a central piece to that. Hormones help us wire in what we do. They help wire in neuroplasticity. And the hormones are at the center of the stress response, at the trauma response, and even there's a hormone that's the safety hormone that for those of us who didn't feel safe in our childhoods, then that got out of balance. And so when all of this starts to change and adjust when we hit our perimenopausal phase, it's all going to start to feel like it's falling apart because our way of keeping things together it has to be perfect. It has to be just the right amount of this, not too much of this, just it's like walking a tightrope
Mm.
in order to get through life and have everything not fall apart. So then when you start experiencing changes in your biology that are going to disrupt these patterns that have been established, your tightrope has shifted.
I
And
would say it broke.
it
I-
broke. Yep, it broke. What used to work doesn't work
Yeah,
anymore.
doesn't work.
So actually, the very first story that I share in my book is about Elena, a patient of mine. She was in her 40s and she was in a car accident.
Mm.
Normally, right? You wouldn't be that big of a problem. It wasn't that big of a car accident. But 2 years later, she was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, lupus. And when I look at her life, she's a professional, she's an executive, she's got a lot on her plate. She's a mom, she's a single mom, two teenage daughters. They're having their issues in school, and she's having to navigate that. So there's so much that's on her plate. And she's coming in and being like, why this? Why now? Do I not already have so much happening in my life? And it was this conversation of, but that's exactly why this is happening.
Mm. Mhm.
It's your body's way of saying, no more. I can't do what we've been doing anymore. And so that conversation led her to her trauma that she'd been storing since childhood. And she had downplayed it, been like, oh, I mean, it wasn't that bad. But now that she could see, oh, but it made my body adapt. And it made my body adapt to living in stress, to living in fear, to living in that anxiety of, I don't know what's going to happen next. Am I going to be okay? And those adaptations made her cope and live in such a way to try to manage that. How do I always know that I'm going to be okay? And for her, it ended up being a lot of control, right? Like
Oh,
the
yeah.
environment needs to be in control. The house needs to be clean. Like everything needs to be perfect in order for me to feel that I'm going to be okay. This was all unconscious until she started unpacking this after she was diagnosed with autoimmunity. So then the shift for her that was then saying, what we need to do is get your body to adapt to feeling safe. Because when we can create an environment where you actually truly feel safe, your body will adapt to that as well. Whatever the environment is, our body adapts to that. But again, as you have just perfectly described, so many of us continue to live in an environment that we create ourselves, but one that is stressful, fast paced, overwhelming, unbearable. And so, how can our body adapt to anything else other than that? And so, the sad truth for me is seeing that we've adapted to stress and trauma in our life, but then we end up recreating so much of those same conditions that keep us in those adaptations, those coping mechanisms, that way of living until the trifecta arrives and no more. And what happens is I see people taking one of two paths. One path is ignoring that and saying, oh, for me, let me go and let me just manage symptoms and get through and not expect a better life. And others are taking the path that say, let me dig deeper. Let me use this time of hormonal shifts to see why was it imbalanced in the first place. And then it becomes a portal for their best life ever. They have a better life as a result of this forcing of looking at what's surfacing in their body.
I love that there's the possibility to get to do that work. I'd love to spend a little bit of time just very quickly on adaptations before we get into safety and what it means to feel safe. And I'd love to hear, because I think as someone's listening to this and they're thinking, huh, huh, just like, ooh, this kind of sounds like me. Again, if adaptations so often are just the fabric of who we are, they become who we are. We don't even know that they are an adaptation. Is it even possible to take a moment and identify some of the most, what would you consider to be common adaptations that you see playing out? Maybe even for women specifically. I know I got mine, control was one of those adaptations, right? Of just needing for me to feel control. That is a strong adaptation of mine. In another adaptation for me, mine is being indispensable. I'm very indispensable. That is that can't get rid of me if you need me. Okay.
I won't be abandoned.
No,
if you need me.
So I'm just going to highlight two of my adaptations. I have a lot more than that. But what are some other adaptations that you see playing out that maybe we could identify? And if we don't have to spend a lot of time here, but I think that could be helpful.
Yeah, no, there's so many adaptations, as you
know.
say, and being able to recognize them is so helpful because then we can better understand what emotional root do I have that I can go look at this specifically rather than being very vague and being like, well, I think that there was stress and trauma, but not really being able to be deliberate and intentional about the process. And I find that strategic, systematic process so helpful when we come to do the trauma work. As we look at adaptations that we would have made in our early childhood, so much of it comes from avoiding feeling a certain way. So for some of us, we needed to avoid that feeling of being unwanted. And so what were the adaptations that we'd made in order to not feel unwanted? Well, maybe I'm not even going to go to the party. I'm not going to go to the social outing because what if I walk in and someone has a look and it brings up that feeling again of I'm not wanted here. So is isolation an adaptation? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we isolate, but we want to have it be more socially acceptable. So what if we just work a lot? So what if I have a really good excuse?
I have a great excuse. I work.
What if I make my life so busy that it's like, oh, I'd love to come to your party tonight. I wouldn't. I'm terrified of feeling unwanted, but I'm not going to say that. I'd love to come, but I've got to work late, but I've got this other responsibility. And so we build in so many layers of these protections that sometimes we don't even know how deep it goes.
Right. They're building one on top of another,
Oh.
whether I think people pleasing too, or, always I'm really great on the follow up. Like I'm an over follow upper, of just like, I don't want someone to think that I'm not on top of it or I'm not, thinking about them. So there's layers and layers of adaptations
Mm-hmm.
or not to feel abandonment. I know is a big one as well. What you build around, not feeling abandoned. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was discovering my adaptations for the first time, and it was not ironic that it was just after my diagnosis of autoimmunity. And I realized that I would avoid the feeling of being tired. Why? Because being tired had meant I do less. I have to rest, which means I'm less productive, which means I'm less valuable.
Oh yeah. Were you words? Yeah, no, you can't afford that.
No, I would be abandoned. I would be all alone. And so I must be productive all the time, which means that I can't feel tired. So
or have time away.
or have time away.
There's no, at least for me, I mean, yeah, productivity is my ultimate love language for myself. Like I'm winning if I'm productive, even yesterday. Yes, this happened yesterday. And I was like, okay, I'm winning. But I know that ultimately it's a deeper seed of like, oh, well, then I'm worthy. No one can call me out on not doing enough.
So here's the difference between someone who is operating still from their trauma fear self and one who's been on the healing journey, though.
Yeah. Mhm.
Those who are still in that operating from their trauma fear self are going to be pushing themselves to be more productive, which is where they get to the point where they're running on fumes because they've pushed themselves so hard without allowing themselves the rest, the rhythms, the resilience. All they know is I have to be productive because it's my survival. Those who are now working on their trauma and they're unpacking that, they're getting to the place where it's like, I'm productive because I love it. I don't feel that same like, no, I have to do this because I'm going to die if I'm not productive.
Right. There's a deep fear that's driving that productivity.
It's instead this deep like passion and purpose that fuels the productivity. And so a behavior can look the same. Someone walking into the gym in the morning at 5 a.m., for example, that looks like the same. They're both walking into the gym at 5 a.m., but one is walking in with the fear of, if I don't get this weight off, my husband's going to leave me or have an affair. The other one is like, I love to start my days early and it gives me the focus and the strength and the aliveness. They're both walking into the gym at 5 a.m., but one's walking in with operating from an adaptation from fear, and one has adapted to aliveness and what is possible.
I see that. Yeah, I see that. Absolutely. And I wonder, I curious, Amy, I know this is more nuanced, and I don't even know if it's necessary, as we've talked about this before, it's not necessary to identify your adaptations per se. That doesn't necessarily going to move you towards healing your trauma. But I know that people also do love to be like, why have I been like this for so long? And just kind of like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. So I know that it's been a yes and for me of like, oh, okay, this is why I am. And knowing that that isn't the path to the deeper healing of my trauma as well. So I just wanted to articulate that but I also know that women are just like, can I just like understand, and I want to speak into safety because I know that at least for me, before I was doing a lot of the work to heal my trauma, that I was often the most safe in these very damaging adaptations. Okay. Because they were.
I've never heard of that before.
So I feel like that's how we get stuck, right? We're yes. Yeah.
And the simple truth is that the nervous system, our body, it feels safe with what is familiar. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily feel safe with what's healthy. It's what it feels safe because it's familiar. And this is where we see children coming out of homes that had alcohol issues and they marry a partner with alcohol issues. And the rest of people are like, why would you do that? Why would you not leave that behind? You know what you're getting into. And if their nervous system were telling the truth, their nervous system would say, that's exactly why I'm doing this, because I know what I'm getting into. I don't know what it would be to not have alcohol issues in a relationship. I don't know how to do that kind of relationship. I know how to do this kind of relationship. I've adapted to these kinds of dynamics that even though they're unhealthy, I know the dynamics.
It's the devil that you know.
It's the devil that you know that your nervous system's going to be like, I'll choose that. And that is why we get stuck then, is because unconsciously we continue to choose what just is familiar because it's what takes less energy for us to figure out how to navigate. So change in our life is where we start. And a person doesn't need to know what trauma they had in their past or be able to identify it. No, take your present day life. What pattern do you see yourself repeating in your life that you're like, oh, I'd like to be able to change that. And what I've done so far to change that hasn't worked yet. That's when you know there's deeper roots. And start right there. And you start seeing like, when do I do this? what leads me to this place? I didn't know how much I was using food for emotional coping until I started doing these very same questions and pausing, like, what triggered me to binge eat right now? What triggered this? Oh, I was at work and I started to feel tired. Oh, how interesting that this theme of I go to this whenever I feel or don't want to feel this. So that's where we start to then have people be able to understand themselves on a deeper level, which I agree with you. That's ultimately what each one of us wants to do. We want to understand ourselves because oftentimes we don't feel that other people can understand us. But how can other people understand us if we don't understand ourselves?
No, I agree. Yeah, I know we've had this conversation where yes, it's important to have awareness so that we obviously know that, okay, I feel like this is something that keeps happening. I keep finding myself here.
Exactly. Keep finding myself here. There must be something to this.
Hmm.
There is, I promise you. And that's where we can follow it back to the roots. And it often comes back down to some degree of I'm afraid of something. I'm
Mhm.
afraid of losing control. Why? What would happen if you lost control? Well, people wouldn't like me. They would leave me. It usually comes back to some element of relationship, connection, and safety in connection.
So let's say we see a pattern, we become aware, we know something, we just know. And again, it's most, I think for some of us, as much as there's a whisper and maybe there's a little like, hey, I feel like it's the Mack truck moment where, like, universe, send me a sign and make it impossible for me to miss, those kind of moments when then we start to do the deeper work. And I know that this is a journey for everyone's a little bit different, but what are some of those first steps of feeling safe in a nurturing, loving, more compassionate environment where we're leaning more into the things that are life giving and nourishing and healthful for our bodies versus falling back into old patterns that, again, that are automatic?
That question reminds me of Helen. Right now, I'm running a group through my 21-day journey. And this is the entry level course that I start everyone at because it's exactly this. How do you create that safety? And Helen last night shared in the open share that after on day 5 of this 21-day journey, she experienced what it felt like to feel safe for the first time in her life.
Mm.
And she had tears as she was describing this feeling for her that she'd heard other people describe, but she'd never felt it herself. And so it never made sense to her. And she's like using words like, felt like a calm river inside. It felt a quiet, but not a scary quiet, and a peaceful quiet. Things slowed down. I felt my chest open up and I felt lighter. I felt like whatever this heaviness had been, it just was lifted. It went somewhere. I don't even know where. But then with that came this full breath. And I hadn't even realized that I wasn't taking deep breaths.
Mm.
So that's the challenge that I find. And I'm sure you see this as well is we can describe safety, but until you have created it for yourself, you have no idea what it actually feels like. You have no reference point for it, which is how you would know how much you actually need it.
Mm.
If you have no reference point, if as those listening, we're talking about safety and they're like, sure, not sure what that is. That is a sign of how much more you need it than anyone else if you've never had it. And what I was discovering, especially as I moved into my addiction medicine clinic, was that most people walk around in life not feeling safe. And we've adapted. And I saw the most powerful thing that I could teach my patients. It wasn't writing them a new prescription, though that was helpful. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't the most powerful thing that I could do that would have the greatest impact on their life. The greatest impact on their life was me teaching them a few simple somatic self practices that could shift their inner state to one of safe enough within seconds. And just with that, I know you're not going to be surprised by this, but just with that, their physical health symptoms started to decrease. I hadn't even given them the prescription yet. They hadn't started the supplements yet. They hadn't done the diet yet. They hadn't done the lifestyle things that you and I teach are so important. And they are important, but they're not going to work as well if our body doesn't feel safe.
Mm. I agree. I feel like that's the first pillar is just feeling safe.
And isn't it amazing how so many people don't feel safe, but yet they don't recognize it because it's their normal?
Mm-hmm. When I think about how the body, on the biology side of things, the lack of safety, menstrual cycles stopping, infertility happening, inflammation in the brain or other parts of the body, because it's a body that just doesn't feel safe.
And that's how we can recognize it, right? Like that's how we can know, oh, my body is in more fear than I've recognized. My body's holding more trauma than what I knew. My body's holding pain and I've neglected it. And so as we look at like truly what is one of the essential steps for a person to really get well and to navigate perimenopause and menopause well is for them to be able to befriend their body, not see their body as broken, as betraying them, or as the problem that we need to fix, but getting on the same team as your body. You're an ally with your body because what we've done is in our busyness, in our stress, and in our fear, we end up abandoning ourselves. We end up abandoning our body. And there's no safety in that. And so then our body is left trying to adapt, trying to cope, not having what it needs until it finally has to get so loud that it's yelling at us. And that's when we've missed all the subtle, more silent messages. And now it's got to be a really big, loud message that gets our attention and stops us in our tracks.
When we're talking about the body really screaming, to listen, when we're talking about the trifecta kind of peri, where there are, again, hormones that are really helping to run the show are not binding to their receptor sites. We see an increase in, insulin resistance, blood sugar deregulation, and we see, muscle that we're losing and just overall like joints that are hurting, shoulders that are freezing, all these things that are happening in our body. And I'm curious, and I know that there's a lot of research and science, but I'm curious how much of what's coming up. I think about peri, there's like close to 100 symptoms because these hormones, I would say these life-giving hormones are whole body hormones. And as they're deregulating, all of a sudden, especially if our body isn't feeling safe, and yet they were kind of helping to hold it down, all of a sudden our protectors are gone in a way that then all of the things start to really exacerbate. And I was curious how much, and there's no way to really quantify this, but how much do we know that it is lifestyle versus a lack of safety versus trauma in our biology? I feel like there are multiple pillars that we get to tend to, right?
It's a really good way to put it, pillars. And as I look at the body, it's all one system.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever we do in our lifestyle is going to affect our emotions.
Yeah, nothing's in a silo. Nothing.
There are no silos. There are no silos. And when we understand that, we see how interconnected everything is. And we see that if we really want to get well with our physical health, we're going to need to do the trauma work. Yeah. And if we really want to do our trauma work, we're going to need to do the lifestyle piece. They're so connected. They're not possible to separate. And again, this is where I saw a big gap in the industry where we've created these two different compartments where it's like, no, that is my physical health. And I go see my doctor for that. And I go see my therapist for those problems in my life and my insecurities or,
my mental health,
my mental health,
yeah.
my mental health,
my anxiety, my depression, my rage, that's for that department. Yeah.
And yet I think that when we come to perimenopause, this is the classic example of how it's all connected. It's all in the same pot. Mm-hmm. Your anxiety, your mental health is so connected with your hormones.
Absolutely.
Look at perimenopause if you need any evidence of that fact. And when we understand the capacity that our body has internally, we see why these shifts in our hormones are going to change our sensitivity to stress, our tolerance to stress. And if we're not equipped, it will actually yield itself to more trauma responses than if we have a greater capacity because we're doing the lifestyle, we're supporting our hormones and I want to say the stabilization during this phase. And so this is a sad thing for me to see so many women unnecessarily experience more stress and more trauma during perimenopause simply because of their biology that's shifting and changing their capacity and how much stress they can hold. And they are, crossing that line of overwhelm or going past their breaking point more often simply because of the biology aspects inside. And that was such an eye opener for me, which is why I wrote the book, The Biology of Trauma, because I realized, wait a second, it's not just the emotional stuff, it's not just the psychological stuff. Our own biology, our hormones, our adrenal glands, our sugar levels, our mitochondria, they are becoming the greatest influence for our stress capacity and our trauma responses. And I wanted people to know that.
I thank you so much for like really breaking that down because I feel like so much of it is siloed, about how we think about it.
This is why so many perimenopausal women are getting started on mood medications
Absolutely.
because they're
Over
going over
control.
there for that issue
Yeah.
without seeing it as the larger issue that's all connected.
Yeah. It's not just an anti-anxiety medication that's going to address this, right?
No.
No. And it's like whack-a-mole. Maybe some of that is mitigated, maybe, even on those medications. I hear a lot of stories that no, but then something else pops and this pop, 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 pop. It's just there's something else that comes back up for you. I think a lot of women, if they're downplaying their trauma, are saying, okay, well, I do have these lifestyles. I do walk outside. I do, I'm in my sauna. I'm reading my books. I'm spending time with my people. And I think that all of these are so wonderful and beneficial. And yes, I don't know the why behind them. We talked about each person who's going to the gym at 5 a.m., different whys for why they're there. From the outsider, like if someone who's going to the gym at 5 a.m., like, that's some discipline right there, and there's something to be said about that. So from the outside, on paper, it looks really good, but the why may be very unhealthy or it may be extremely healthy. But so I see a lot of women, they are doing I don't know, overdoing or doing. And I definitely want to celebrate if you've built in self-care. I definitely want to celebrate if you are eating an anti-inflammatory diet. I want to celebrate if you're out with your people in real life. And then for some of us, for a lot of us, it may not be, it's definitely probably not enough because we're still not addressing the bigger elephant in the room. Yes, there's probably some benefit. I know that when I walk out in nature, especially when I walk outside with my besties and I got my favorite matcha from my favorite place, I definitely feel safer. I feel more free. I feel good. There's a lot of boxes I'm checking. And yet it doesn't mean that that deeper trauma is being addressed. And so I think there's a lot of downplay there that as long as we're checking the boxes on the biohacks or the hacks or whatever, that it's good enough. We're healing it all, but we're not. And so I wanted to just speak into that too, because I know that I have fallen into that spiral of like, I'm checking all the things, and yet I'm not doing the thing.
Yeah, it reminds me that when I first started my healing journey, it was so much focused on how do I just fix what's broken? And then,
Because what time and energy capacity.
yes, it was such a low point for me. I waited until my body was screaming at me. So I hope that other women do not do that. I hope that they're listening to their body earlier than what I did. But then, as I started to check all the boxes, and it got to a place where it was like, I'm going to ask a different question now,
Mm,
which is, how much more alive could I be?
yeah. I love that question.
And then it changed everything because no longer was I focused on what do I need to heal? What do I need to fix? Who's the next person that I need to go to? What's the next issue that's going to come up? It really shifted my perspective to no, how much more alive could I be? I don't even know the possibilities because I've never lived that. I've never been that. I've never been that version of myself. And it keeps me in a place of curiosity. It keeps me in a place of learning. It keeps me in a place of, yes, I'm still going to check all the boxes because I feel the best when I do. And I'm not going to settle here.
Mm.
And that would be my encouragement for women everywhere, wherever they are in their healing journey, wherever you are, whether you've started trauma work or you haven't, whether you're checking all the boxes or you probably should start checking some of those boxes. Don't settle. Don't settle and think that this is the best that there is for you.
Mm.
The
Don't settle.
people who have gotten to this place, like you, right? Like gotten to this place where they're doing all the work and they're going one layer at a time. They're not doing it out of fear or survival mode, but they're just doing it from a place of what more is possible? How
Yeah.
much better could I feel? I want my best life. They are having their best life. They are having their best life at a time when they thought it would be the worst because, oh, I'm now postmenopausal and I thought that this would be the end of my life and the end of the best years of my life, only to realize actually, because of the windows that it opened up for healing, this has become the best years of my life.
I love that. Yeah, no, stepping into the second half of our life where we get to let go of maybe it's the unnecessary obligations or the boundaryless relationships or the toxic relationships or whatever that may be. Like we get to redefine. If you are in a zone of chaos or that everything is up for review, what an opportunity. I always say this is a window of vulnerability and opportunity. Yes, things are shifting, but man, what an opportunity if we choose. It's deciding is a big part of this. Like we could absolutely, we've seen women who go in default mode. That's maybe even your grandmother or your aunt or people in your life. I love that. I love the choosing. That's such a big part of the message that I bring to the table too in this journey of like, you get to decide if you want it to continue like this or not. Like this is the signal that the body is telling you. Like here we are, we're in an inflection point.
Exactly. And I see that you embody that ability to choose and that excitement to choose. It's one
Yeah.
of the things I love about you. Like it pours out of you that this is your life and how you've chosen to live your life and how you empower others. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation because
Yeah.
those in trauma, they're not choosing. Their nervous system is choosing for
For
them
them without permission. I
without
think trauma
permission.
is really the ultimate without permission.
Without permission.
Yeah. I want to talk about the book because I want to say that I started doing trauma work probably a little over a decade ago, and I didn't know what it was to do trauma work. I was just going to people who said that they did it. I didn't know. And I will say that there's a lot of marketing around doing trauma work, Aimie, and I don't know if it all was trauma work. And so I think a lot of people are like, am I even is this breathwork session that is being marketed as trauma breathwork, work? Is it? Is this meditation protocol that I've been giving? Is this actually healing trauma? Or is this woman who is, a version of internal family systems? Is this actually getting to what it is? And so I do find that a lot of people are talking about it, a lot of people are marketing around it. And I will say that I have gone down some rabbit holes and I'm like, I don't know if this was what I think is actually happening here. And so, one of the reasons why I'm so grateful for your book and you as a resource is that the clarity, the transformation, like it's the real deal. Like, if you're like, okay, I am ready to do this work, I am ready for my sage, I am ready for the person who's going to walk through the fire with me, like, you're it. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts around
Got lots of thoughts.
around this. I just wanted to address this elephant in the room that I feel like no one ever addresses.
I've got lots of thoughts, and this is sometimes where I get into trouble because then they turn into very strongly expressed thoughts.
Yeah.
But it comes from a place of I get upset about what I see happening.
Yeah. I have a feeling.
And why I get upset is because I see it hurting people.
Mm.
And that really makes me upset. Now, I don't think that the professionals and the practitioners are trying to hurt people. I think they have the best of intentions. But like you say, without the clarity and the systematic process, we're going to hurt people when we're going to hurt places.
Yeah. No, yeah. Like I've been forced to go into the dregs of my trauma moments. And I'm like, what is this doing? It's not, I'm just upset.
Good.
I'm just triggered. Now, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't feel like I got anything out of this, but just now I'm upset again.
Right. And that's so much of what I see happening and as well to my patients, which is why it was so important for me to teach them what they could do for themselves. Because so much of what happens and is labeled as trauma work is going in too much too fast, too deep too fast. And I understand the desire to get things done quick. I've even had patients, and I talk about Laura in my book, who she was my patient who came in. She's like, I need to do trauma work. Okay, I'm going to take 6 months off. I'm going to check myself in. I'm going to do all of
I
my
mean,
trauma
6
work in
months,
6
Laura,
months.
go you, girl. I thought she was going to be like,
Right.
I have 6 weeks. Okay. We need to fix this trauma.
Not exactly how this works because the body heals in layers and we can't force healing to happen. Force and healing are polar opposites, in fact. And when we go into a story, we are experiencing all of those same emotions. And without creating a different outcome for those emotions, we're re traumatizing ourselves. We're reinforcing the same trauma patterns that we're trying to change. What we need to do instead is we need to baby step our way in. And this is where we come back to our idea of safety. To do trauma work, we actually have to do it staying safe enough. So when we are ready to work on a story, and yes, I am very intentional about saying when we are ready, because that is not where we want to start. If that is where your therapist starts you, please just walk out the door. Do not start with story and the listing of all the things that have happened and what you're working on. When you're ready to work on the story, that's exactly what it needs to be. You're working on the story, not going into the story. There's a big difference. Most people don't know that difference. And so they're going along with a process that ends up going into a story, re-experiencing those emotions and re-traumatizing them in the process. It's very hurtful. If they have a chronic health condition like autoimmunity or chronic fatigue, they will often see themselves showing that with their physical health symptoms. They're getting flare-ups or maybe back pain or neck pain or hives or some rashes, digestive issues. This is all a sign that your body is trying to tell you that was not helpful. That was not slow enough. That was too much too fast. It's beyond my capacity to process that and move through it in a way that's going to heal me. And instead, I've just re-experienced all of that shit.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Because the body doesn't know.
The body does not know the difference between what is in the past and what is in the present when what I'm feeling is right now.
Yeah.
Which is also why we have to be very careful about what we watch on TV. Your body does not know the difference between what it sees on a screen and what it sees in real life. So our body is experiencing everything that we're exposing it to. And that's where we really are downplaying so much of the experience of the body, thinking that we can think our way through things and logically put things in their proper perspective. And that's not true. What the body experience is really what it comes down to.
I'm so grateful that I just wanted you to touch upon that really quickly, because I know that a lot of people are doing their best to do the work and then finding themselves re-triggered, finding themselves in a spiral. And I knew I've had so many of those experiences myself. And I'm like, man, what am I doing wrong? Why am I still stuck like this? Why does this feel even worse than it was before? And I wanted to speak into that because I have I just know that is not just me, it's happening too. Okay, so I got a little distracted because I saw the book in the background, or at least I saw the picture of the cover, and it's just so beautiful. It's so and so the biology of trauma. What would you? I mean, the book is out. It's out right now. Go get it. It's available everywhere. But when you were crafting this book, and I know that there's so many iterations went into this, that I knew you poured your heart and soul and everything into this, because in so many ways, when we're healing trauma, it really is a high stakes game. And I'd love for you to speak into, what are you hoping that people get from it? What are the results you're wanting people to walk away from?
I wrote this book for people to be able to understand themselves on a deeper level. I wanted them to be able to understand, why do you continue to do what you do? Why do you react that way? Why does your body react that way? Why does your body have the symptoms, conditions, and diagnoses that it does? I wanted people to understand themselves on that deeper level. And through that lens, I really wrote it for those people who don't know for sure if they've had trauma. And so even in chapter 1, I start with, here's how we define a stress for the body. Here's how we define a trauma for the body. Because without that distinction, their best is kind of without context. And so this is what people can expect. Chapter 1 opens with my patient Elena in her car accident and walking a person through, here's the difference between, was that car accident a stress for her or was it a trauma for her? How would we know? How would you know if something that you are going through right now is a stress for you or is a trauma for you?
Or a reactivation of that trauma? You know, was that a possibility too?
The way that I talk about the trauma is a trauma response.
Oh, trauma. Okay. Yeah.
Is your body going through a trauma response right now in this relationship that you're in, or in the evenings or at work, whatever it is? When you feel that trigger, is that a stress response that your body is going into, or is that a trauma response? Is this stress biology or trauma biology? But then I walk them through, why does the body hold on to those experiences? How does that happen? What's actually happening at the cellular level that it makes us sick later on? So that in section 3, I come around and say, and here's your map to repair all of that. Here's your map to repair what has happened, to repair what was broken, to repair the line that was crossed. We've got to repair, and we've got to repair on 3 different levels. And so I go through that in section 3 of the book.
Oh, I love it. Ooh. Well, it is available everywhere books are sold. I'll have the link. Do you want to just shout out where you would love for them to go?
They can go to Amazon to order it, but there's also, bookstores. It's in bookstores. There's other sellers. If you don't like Amazon, there's other sellers that you can go to online, and I'm happy to provide that link as well for finding those other sellers. But Amazon, and then I've got some bonuses for people to be able to take advantage of, for them to be able to get more out of that book, a masterclass, my 5-day reset, these extra goodies, we can call them, that are going along with the book just for this week though.
Yeah. So the biology of trauma is available now. I want to make sure you know what it's called. And this is the book to have. Every one of us are dealing with some level of trauma, and we all deserve to heal. We all deserve to heal from it, not only for ourselves, but for our future generations, for our children and our grandchildren. Yeah. You know, if in case you wanted some responsibility on top of it. Inspiration.
Motivation.
No bigger driver for women than to be like, okay, I'm not traumatizing my kids.
Yeah, no, that's a big concern.
Yeah, it's definitely my concern for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm excited because I have read every trauma book on the market, and I know you and I know your work, and I am so excited to get this book. I am going to have a hard copy, and I'm going to be listening it on Audible. I'm going to be doing both, and I highly recommend that everyone do both. If you're a mom like me and you are doing the most, Audible, thank you so much. And then I like a book like this, I want the hard copy too. So yes, get both. And I'll tell you, there's no book out there like this. I don't care if you've read any other trauma book before. It's maybe some that have even triggered you. I'm not going to name those, then the name that's out there. But that this book is, there's such a compassion and a deep knowing of how the mechanisms of trauma actually work, and what is a very gentle way to actually approach healing your body and feeling safe. And that I've rarely seen done in any of the books that are out there. And so I'm just so deeply grateful for you to do it.
Well, thank you. This means a lot, and it means a lot to finally put this out into the world.
Yeah.
As you said, yes, there's a lot of time, love, and energy put into this. And it's amazing. And I hope that it changes as many lives as possible.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.